to cease, just from Jesus simply taking life and rest and joy and peace. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I prove him more and more. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more.
Now, we're going to give the rest of the time to our brother Justin. I want to say just my own personal joy at seeing Justin and Sharon. Um, it's really great to be able to see our brothers and sisters even over this long distance. And I trust that our brother Justin will have a word of encouragement for us. Justin.
Well, good evening. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. I was hoping to see you all personally. I owe you a visit, and I haven't been able to do so. So that's last, I don't know how many weeks ago, but Sissel posted that you were doing Zoom. And ever since then, I had it in my heart. If I couldn't come there personally to see you all, that maybe at least this way I could see everyone. Not fully expecting it to turn into testimony meeting and speaking on Sunday, but just to see everyone, only because I know our history, and I know I grew up literally in Florida and spent many years there, and I owe you my thanks and my gratitude for your prayers for us. Our family is doing well. I am working in supply chain, just like I was in Florida for HCA when I was there. I work for Mainline Health here in Philadelphia, and my job is to get the equipment and the supplies that the doctors need. So I'm working behind the scenes to get the masks and the gloves and the gowns and everything that all the clinicians need. That's where God has placed me. And so thankfully, through God's grace, we've been okay here at the system that I work at. Sharon's doing well. She's still working as a pharmacist. She's also there. And Caleb is 7, and Hannah is 4. Caleb is doing his classes online. They've closed school here for the rest of the year. And Hannah, God willing, will join preschool in September. My testimony is, it's not unique in that sense that there's 2 other members in my own family, my sisters, that have just as equal ways of describing the things that they've been through, the ways that God has guided them as a family. So they're here, Mom and Dad are here. I asked some of the, I can't call them kids anymore. So the young adults that I've seen grow up now, start families of their own. I've asked them to join only because I wanted to see you all and share the same message of the way God has guided our families. So like I said, Jinsey and Joyce have been suffering with things that only they can describe. Even I can't fully describe or explain the way that God has guided them, their families. Sometimes when we get together as a family, we just see Sharon, Godly, and Daniel, and we just let them have a time, and they look at each other, say, and the Jana. They just sit there, and we let them have their time, and then we enjoy our time together as a family, you know. It's been a rough road, but in all of that, we see God's grace. The way that he's guided us and protected us. So I want to share a little bit of how that came about. When I first moved down to Florida with Dad and Mom in '93, I was sick for a little bit. When I came down there, you all know that I was in the hospital in Coral Springs for a while. And they recognized back then in '93, that's how far this goes back, that I had low hemoglobin and high iron. So that's all they understood at that time. And from 93 on to about 2005, I was fine. I was regular. There's nothing that you could tell that there was anything wrong with me. You all saw me grow up during that time. In that 12 years, there's no issues like that. So in 2006, Dad actually advised me. Dad said, he said, he didn't sit me down. He said, you know, you're paying every month for insurance. You're working now. You have insurance. Why don't you just go to the doctor and just get a checkup? So I listened. I went and got some blood work done. Same thing that happened in 93 happened in 2005, 2006 time, where my iron was so high, hemoglobin was so low. So the doctor, the hematologist that I saw in West Palm Beach, he put me on a medication called Exjade, and that helped to lower the iron somewhat. In 2007, I moved here to Philly, and I actually got in touch with Sissel because I knew that he had studied hematology oncology, and I asked if he knew any hematologists I could touch base with here. So I followed the doctor that he trained under, that Sissel trained under, Dr. Rubin at Temple for 10 years. He was my doctor for 10 years. So when I moved here in 2007, there was a particular resident or fellow that was studying under Dr. Rubin, and he took a particular interest in my case because it was like this puzzle that he was trying to figure out. And he called me one day and he said, you know, I think I might know what your condition is, but we're going to have to do a bone marrow biopsy just to see particularly if that's the case. So we did the bone marrow biopsy in 2008, and I finally had a diagnosis as to what the condition was. I've had it since birth. Nobody else in my family has it. On mom's side, dad's side, nobody has this particular condition. It's sideroblastic anemia. So they finally put a, you know, classified it, diagnosed it as sideroblastic anemia. Life went on, you know. 2016, I had actually interviewed in Tampa for a job to move down to Tampa. I got the job, but for whatever reason, there was no peace in my heart about that job. And so it was a hard decision because mom and dad are there. And I, you know, I don't know if it's the Malayali mentality, but being the only son in the house, you know, you have that obligation to take care of them. So whatever reason, I don't know why, but God did it. I couldn't put myself in that job for some reason. I had no peace about it. So I let that job go. We found a home here in Philadelphia in September of 2016. The thing about the job is that I was working with at Temple with Joyce. It's the one time in our lives that me and Joyce, we went to school together when she was in kindergarten. She was in kindergarten, I was in 8th grade, and Jinsey was in the middle. That was the only year that the three of us went to school together. And now in adulthood, Joyce is working at Temple, I'm working at Temple, and it was just great to have her there. Then, you know, we moved to this house and my commute became too long, so I found a new job at Mainline Health. My commute went down from an hour to 15 minutes. So God provided a way where, you know, I could spend more time with the family and everything. Thing is that with that new job came new insurance, and with the new insurance, I had to find a new hematologist. And so this new hematologist was at Jefferson University, and she looked at my case with a new set of eyes and said, hey, why don't we get just these baseline tests to see how you're doing. So by the time the new insurance kicked in, it was 2017, 2017, January 28th, 2017, right? 2018. 2018, January 20. So I met with her March 2018 was my first appointment. She ordered these tests. In April, I had an MRI. The goal of the MRI was just basically to figure out how much iron was in the liver because it had never been quantified. They had never seen how much iron that I might have in the liver. And April 27th, my hematologist called and said, not only do you have iron in your liver, but you also have a tumor on your pancreas. So I didn't know really what to do at that point. You know, you hear this news and that, you know, your life, I know because of Ayla Mandy here in Philadelphia that she had a hard time with what she went through. I knew it wasn't good news. But even then, looking back, you're so naive as to what that kind of news actually means. You don't know what to do. So we went for the biopsy. The biopsy wasn't made. The doctor didn't really confirm too much from that. He basically said without saying that, you know, the tumor's there. And then in June 27th of 2018, we had the surgery. So when the surgery was going to take place, there were three options, which is that they could take out the tumor. And depending on the anatomy of the pancreas, that he might either just take out the tumor plus part of the pancreas. Or the third option was take out the tumor, part of the pancreas, and the spleen. So the doctor said he wouldn't be able to tell which one he would do until he actually got into the surgery. When he got into the surgery, the plan was that it would be a 4-hour surgery and hopefully everything was done by then. It turned out to be a 9-hour surgery that I went through. You know, you're sitting under anesthesia, so the patient has really no recollection of what's going on. But for Sharon, for mom and dad, for everybody that's waiting, Jen, Joy, everybody that was here at that time, they know how long that day was for them. So the doctor ended up taking out the third option, which was including part of the spleen. So recovery, I was in the hospital from June 27th until July 3rd. July 3rd, there was a problem at the hospital. They actually needed to discharge a lot of the patients. There was no water in the building. So they discharged me, they sent me home. I came home. The midnight of July 4th, literally between midnight of July 4th and July 5th, I became sick with gastro issues, vomiting and all of that. And I had to go back. Sharon took me in the middle of the night at midnight, took me down to the emergency room. And I spent the next 7 days at the hospital. It turned out that you're only supposed to have 10 milliliters of fluid between your lung, lining of the lung and everything. I had a liter, about 1,000 mLs worth of fluid in my lung. And they had to drain that out. I had 2 infections. One was a Pseudomonas infection and one was Corynebacterium infection. I had both of those going on. All this to say, it was literally about 20 days where I couldn't eat anything. I lost about 23 pounds in the process. Came home, recovered, got back to work. August 27th, I was back at work. When I got back to work, the thing is that my job is a lot of meetings and sitting in conference rooms and things like that. What we didn't understand at the time is that when they took out the spleen, it was covering for a lot of the breakdown of my red blood cells. Since I have this anemia, my red blood cells only last a portion of the length that a normal person's red blood cells last 120 days. Mine last fraction of that. So all of this dead material was going to the spleen. That's where it was sitting. Normal spleen size is about the size of an orange. Mine was the size of a cantaloupe during the time of the surgery. That's why the surgeon took it out. But all of this dead red blood cells were kind of being eaten by the spleen, and that's where they would go. By October, I had started to develop 2 DVTs. So they put me on Xarelto. I had 2 DVTs in my right leg. So they put me on Xarelto. And I was doing well on Xarelto. The swelling and everything that I experienced in my legs was coming down. Fast forward to January 2019. Mom and dad are actually here in Philly, and Cam's uncle passed away on January 26th. So mom and dad were actually leaving to go back to Tampa. I dropped them off at the airport. On the afternoon of the 27th, I bought tickets to come to Fort Lauderdale for the funeral. I bought tickets to go down. And that evening, January 27th evening, Sharon came home and we were watching our wedding video. We hadn't watched it in a while, and Cam's uncle did the message at our wedding. So I wanted to see that, just to see him and see the message that he gave us that day. While we're watching the video, my right hand started shaking uncontrollably. My right side started sloping down. I looked over at Sharon and I said, you know, has my face changed? And she understood what happened right then, called 911. By the time the paramedics came, everything resolved. I was back to normal. My speech was back to normal. My right side stopped shaking. Everything was fine. They checked my blood pressure. Everything was okay, but we still went to the hospital. When we went to the hospital, they realized that I had a stroke. So luckily, the neurologist at that hospital ordered a PFO study, a bubble study, which was the reason how this whole stroke happened. Usually at birth, people's PFO closes when they take their first breath. Your PFO closes. It's a hole in your heart that closes usually, but there's 25% of the population where it doesn't close, and you won't know this usually, but because I had this clotting problem, that's how the stroke happened, and that's why they were able to realize I had a hole in the heart. So I got placed on a different medication. They took me off Xarelto and they put me on warfarin from January 2019. The normal range for Coumadin, I'm not sure. I think it's 2.0 or something like that. I was 3.5. My INR was 3.5. I was therapeutic, and I was still developing 3 more superficial blood clots I had. So they took me off that medication, and in March was a hard month. March 2019 was a very hard month. I went to the hospital twice in 1 week, that first week. March 8th, my hematologist came and said, you know, I don't have any other answers for you. The only answer that I have right now for you is a bone marrow transplant. And that was hard to hear, because it meant that she was looking to do a clinical trial for me in New York. And it involved chemo, it involved radiation, it involved all of these things. And it would take literally a year to come back to some sort of normal. And the doctor put me on a new medication, Lovenox, a new blood thinner, which was twice a day injection. So I didn't know what to do at that point, because in order to find a bone marrow transplant match, the best candidates were either Jinsey or Joyce, because we have the same genetic material. So it would involve all of our family, all of these things. And somewhere in that time, in that first week of March, I remember Jesus coming to Bartimaeus, the blind man, and he said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And it's not that God is just a wishing well, or that he's just the one that grants every single thing that we wish for. But I took that passage to heart. He said, "What did you want me to do for you?" And I said, "Lord, I need this medication to work. I don't want to go for a bone marrow transplant. I don't want to face 3 months without my family. We've been through enough already. Please grant that, this medication will work. And he has. I've been stable since last year, since March of 2019. I know that that's not the same story for everyone. I have 2 sisters that are suffering day by day. They only say that, lightning never strikes the same place twice. It feels like lightning struck at our place 3 times, The relief that I've experienced, I know, is not just God, it's God showing his mercy towards us. And so this testimony that I have is really, what can you say after this? Because there's more to this. There's actually, Sharon almost, she had a car accident on August 14th of this 2019, the year before that. And she went up a hill, the car flipped over twice, and she came down the embankment, landed on her tires. No other car was involved. She read the passage of the Red Sea with the kids that morning, and she literally felt like God was pushing the other cars back, held her in his arms. That day, if you saw the car, you wouldn't believe she came out with no broken bones, no scratches, no nothing. That's how we feel. Like we've gone through all of these experiences and still we're here. Somehow, by God's grace, we are still here. So what can I say to you? My message to you tonight is that we've lived these last 2 years of hope. That's the one thing that I can say. Hope. Just briefly, I know we only have 5 minutes left. Briefly, I want to turn your attention to Exodus chapter 13. Exodus chapter 13 and verse 17. It says, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that way was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The Philistines went up out of Egypt armed for battle. Verse 19, that Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear an oath. He said to them, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up with you from this place. And then after leaving Succoth, they encamped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night up in a pillar of fire to give them light, so they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. So if I was going to use the acronym of HOPE, if I made that word into an acronym, HOPE, H starts with him. It starts with him. You look in the first verse, it says, God did not lead them. And then it says, for God said. And then verse 18, it says, so God led. And you can start hope with him. There is no other place that our hope can be found. It's in him that we find our hope. We find our assurance. We find our rest. All of that is found in him. So if you find your hope anywhere else, it's all shifting sand. But in the hard times in life, in the last couple of years, what we've experienced is him being our hope, his presence. If you look at the word O, or the letter O, his omnipotence, his omnipresence, and his omniscience. Look at verse 21. It says that by day the Lord went ahead of them in the pillar of cloud. His omnipotence, that he is all powerful. This pillar of cloud, nobody could come defeat that. There was a pillar of fire that stood there by night. His power led the people of Israel. His omniscience, verse 17, it says, when God let the people of Israel go, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though it was shorter. For God said, if they face war, he knew exactly what they were thinking. My surgeon that did my surgery, by the time that I had gone through the surgery, between July 3rd and July 5th, in the 2 days that I was discharged, he went on vacation. I did not know that he went on vacation. He was very responsive. He answered all my calls, took all the questions that Sharon had. But God knew my heart. Because if I knew that the surgeon was going to go on vacation, I would have looked for another surgeon. That's just the truth. He left for another job to Ohio within the 2 weeks that I had the surgery. If I knew that, I would have looked for another surgeon. But God, knowing my heart, kind of blinded that from me until the time was appropriate. God knows. His omniscience is an unbelievable thing. He knows you better than you know yourself. His omnipresence, think about verse 22. It says, neither the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. God never left them alone. There has never been a moment that I could say that I went alone in all of this. The pillar of cloud, the pillar of fire, it never left the presence in front of the people. He guided them day by day. I don't know what else I can say. That's what our experience has been. His purpose, if you take the letter P in hope, his purpose, he knew that if he led them through the Philistine country, they would change their minds. And so he purposefully led them the longer way. Even though it was longer, he knew their heart. So on purpose, he took them the longer way. And finally, this last thing, the letter E, eternity. Look at what Joseph said. Verse 19. Joseph made an oath to the sons of Israel, and he said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones with you when you leave this place. You must take my bones, he said. Take my bones with you. There were some 400 years that the Israelites were waiting for their deliverer to come. Moses comes. After 435 years, he takes them from their place. And Joseph's words were echoed into Moses' mind, and he decides that he will be the one to carry Joseph's bones. We could be all these things on earth. We could have wonderful careers. We can be put in all of these wonderful positions, but this world is just our temporary home. Today, Dad mentioned, but our family put to rest my uncle, my mom's brother. They literally put his body in the ground today. But that place is not his home. And it's not going to be Moses that carries his body up. For the dead in Christ shall rise first, and those who are alive will be caught up in the air. That is our hope, that even though my uncle was buried today, that his bones will literally be transported into the air. And that I'll see him again. That's our hope, that even though this tumor was there, that even though I went through this clotting, even though I had a seizure, even though Jinsey and Joyce may struggle with the things that they struggle with, our hope is in him. Our hope is that his presence guides us. Our hope is that he is purposeful, even though we can't see what it is. Our hope is eternity. Even if our body is laid to rest here on this earth, that we have this eternal hope in him. That's what's guided us over these last 2 years. And so we can smile. Just like it says about the lady, the Proverbs 31 woman, she laughs in the days ahead. How can that be? If you go through hard times like this, how can you laugh? Because our hope, our God, makes it possible. He's faced the toughest challenge that we could ever face, which is the consequence of our sin. If he took that on, all of this is nothing for him. He carries us. He's been with us every single step of the way. Just like it says in verse 22, the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. That's what I hold on to. That pillar of cloud, that fire has never left. It's always been there. I pray that this edifies you tonight. It's been in my heart, even though I can't, I haven't been able to physically be there, to thank you for your prayers, for your love, for your support for each one of us. I thank God that we had this ability to at least share a little bit of what we've been going through and how you can continue to pray for us. My latest course of treatment has been to do blood transfusions. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of that, but my treatment now is to do blood transfusions. So the hope with that is that my body won't have to struggle as much to make its own red blood cells with the donations that people have been so generously donating their own blood. I do that every 3 weeks. Because of COVID. I've been shifted down to every 4 weeks, but once a month because of COVID, I go in. I went in Friday. Friday was my last transfusion. So that's my course of treatment for right now. This probably is long-term because they are looking to stop things like pulmonary hypertension and long-term picture effects. So for now, that's where God has us. We'll see where He guides us in the future. We're human. There's never a day that you don't think, God, what may be coming next. But the second those thoughts come, I am reminded personally that He has never left us and that He has been with us, the same God that spared my life these last 2 years. I couldn't, this pancreas tumor could have been something I found out 6 years from now. And by then it could have been, much worse than what it actually is right now. But He, by His graciousness, spared me all of that. So I trust in that. At this time, I guess I will leave it to, I'll kick it back to Sissel, and thank you all. May the name of the Lord be glorified once again from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for your prayers and your support for our family collectively.
Thank you, Justin. I'm speechless. What an amazing God we serve. Let's continue to remember Justin and Sharon as they continue in their way. Also to remember Jinsey and Joyce and their families. I know that they have their health issues. We don't know what anybody ever goes through. But the Lord knows. Our omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent God knows. And that's the comfort that we have. If I may, I'm going to ask Sam Mungle, can you please close this meeting in a word of prayer, especially remembering Justin and Sharon, Jinsey and Godly, Dan and Joyce, Anchanango, Amriandi. Please keep them all in special prayer.